Hello, thank you for joining us for this fantastic upcoming conversation. I'm Kristin Judge with the Cybercrime Support Network. We are a non-profit public-private partnership, and we are serving individuals and small businesses impacted by cybercrime. We appreciate being here today at the Cybersecurity Summit. So we'll get right into it. I'm going to have each of the participants on the panel introduce themselves, and then we'll get into some questions. Nathan, please start us off.
Thanks, Kristin. I'm Nathan Wenzler. I'm the Chief Security Strategist here at Tenable. We are the creators of Nessus, the vulnerability assessment scanner, and the leaders in risk-based vulnerability management.
Thank you. Ben?
Hey, hi everybody. Ben Smith with RSA. I'm the company's Field Chief Technology Officer for North America. RSA's been around for a long time, almost 40 years, but today in our current iteration, we've got 3 business units around security, risk, and anti-fraud.
Thank you. Joel?
Thanks, Kristin. Hello, everybody. My name is Joel Hollenbeck. I'm with the Office of the CTO here at Checkpoint Software Technologies. We've been a player in this market going on 25 years. So thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Ryan?
Hi, I'm Ryan Gritt, a solutions architect with ReliaQuest. Our solution is an integrated SaaS security platform called Gray Matter, and that helps our customers enable OpenXDR.
All right, thank you. So let's get right into the SOAR conversation. The first question, we'll start with Nathan. Nathan, what types of tasks can be automated by a SOAR solution to free up time spent on tasks that are really routine for your security teams?
Yeah, I think the kind of things that we're going to be talking about today in the automation world for SOAR platforms really come down to a couple of categories. One are some of the basic manual tasks that take up a lot of time that tend to be very simple or easily automatable that help desks and security teams and IT groups often get mired in. We're talking about when certain events happen or if certain pieces of information are found in log files or an email. We want to be able to then have the network or the systems respond to it. And in a lot of cases, humans get involved to isolate a workstation or move an email off into a phishing service to take a look at it. But these can all be automated if you can set up the right kinds of rules and tasks to identify them and do that. And the goal of all these SOAR platforms is to try to get those very easily repeatable and often high volume tasks automated so that you can free your people up to do more complex things.
Great, thank you. Ryan, did you want to join in on this one?
Yeah, I think just kind of add to what Nathan was saying there. You look at the full incident response lifecycle from detection all the way through to response, and there's a lot of opportunities in there to build those little automations. It doesn't necessarily have to be, alert fires, detection happens, and we take it all the way through to isolating a host. But it can be, well, I know whenever a phishing email comes in, I'm going to want to get context on the sender. I'm going to want to get context on the recipient user. I can automate those queries. And then when it comes time to actually perform a remediation, you might not have the machine doing, making that decision, but you can certainly automate the mechanics of executing the script that's going to reset the user or logging into Proofpoint and pulling, or any email security appliance and pulling the email, right? So it's really, it's about making the mundane a little bit quicker and improving efficiency.
Thanks, Ryan. Ben, I'm going to bring this next question to you. You know that security teams have a lot of different vendor products in their toolbox. How can SOAR work with all the other different solutions that they have?
Well, it's really the A in SOAR, right, around the automation component. And we've heard Nathan and Ryan both directly speak to that really being, I think, the fundamental value. It really is about taking some of these remedial tasks, things that are fairly click-centric, very manual, and automating them, not just for speed, but from a personnel perspective to make sure that you don't burn out your security personnel. We've all been challenged with not just hiring folks, but with keeping folks engaged. So that automation component is important. If you're working with a vendor in the SOAR space, if you're working with any vendor, quite frankly, in the security space, asking about integrations and just how that works generically. Some vendors will have, and I'm making the air quotes right now, integrations as complicated as email that gets sent from one system to another. That's perfectly fine and acceptable until and unless you get into some high volume environments where something like a full-blown API might make sense. Ryan mentioned scripting just now. There's lots of ways you can kind of perform that integration. So I would encourage you to have that serious conversation with your vendor, because every vendor defines integration differently. But the more integration paths, plural, that you have, the easier it's going to be to bring a SOAR technology into your existing environment.
Thank you, Joel. I'll have you take this question first, and then we'll have the others chime in. You know, sometimes people are going to be concerned that a SOAR tool is going to take over a response to a security event without a human intervening. Is that something that they should be concerned about, or how would you talk to people who have that concern?
I mean, the whole market will be concerned about it regardless of whether they should be or not. I think there is, there's some risk associated with it. You need to understand that risk and you need to respond accordingly. Preventative technologies, for example, have been around for over a decade, right? But there is resistance in the market to having machines make decisions about these things in the environments. That's going to take time, right? We need to build confidence around the solutions, around the orchestration, automation. This is something we're all driving towards. It's what cloud is all about, right? Being agile. Being agile requires that we orchestrate and automate. The same thing comes with the security tools, not only from the policy but from the responses. So we need to have many years of confidence building before organizations are going to be 100% comfortable with it. They need to have a better understanding of the risk. They need to be able to understand how to navigate around that risk before we get over that collectively.
Yeah, and Ryan, what are your thoughts on this same question?
You mentioned a couple things that I think are really key there when it comes to the prevention technologies that have been around historically. It's really kind of similar to what we did, with IDS, IPS in the past, where you have it in a detection state for a period of time, and then you might turn on blocking or turn on some of that intervention. Same thing is going to apply here with SOAR. We have to have the data set. We have to be confident in that data set. And then once confidence is built, you can start rolling out, production preventative automations.
And then let's have Ben. Ben, did you want to join in on this question also? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would encourage you, whether it's Joel's point or Ryan's point, understand where you are philosophically about automating these decisions. That's the kind of the first important point. And again, don't forget the people component that I touched on a little earlier. It's the quickest way to break the fantastic new technology that you've spent a lot of money and time implementing. If you're humans, determine that this is creating more friction than good, you're on your path to failure. So from an implementation perspective, don't throw your SOAR solution into an automated state immediately. That's something that most organizations are going to spend months, maybe a few quarters, kind of easing in to make sure that you're not affecting the current business and its processes. Absolutely.
Nathan, can you join in on that too?
Yeah, I think that the people side of that is a really important part of this whole process. From a technology standpoint, I think any of us who've been in the industry for a while, when we look at implementing new services or technologies, we try to do the crawl, walk, run approach, right? So to Ryan and Joel's point, totally spot on. Don't jump to the full automation baseline, what you're doing. Makes sense. But in something like SOAR, I think we even have to step back from the crawl for a minute. And where people get nervous, basically, what you asked originally, when people get nervous about turning over these products to just automate the world, they get nervous because they don't understand how their own processes work internally. They haven't done the homework up front to really identify, what do my workflows look like today? What am I doing in a manual way today? When I have an incident or have responses, what does my team do now? If you don't know what you're doing now, you're going to be scared and automated because you're not really sure what the tool is going to do. So taking that time up front, even before you bring your vendors in, to understand your processes, understand how you do business today in all of these different tasks and flows. It's not terribly sexy. It's not a silver bullet, but it gets it done so that when you get to the automation, you have a lot more confidence that it's going to automate the processes you understand. It's going to be far less scary, going to be much easier to crawl, walk, run.
That's one of the points I took away from another panel we did. It stuck with me, Nathan. Yeah, you have to know what you're doing before you could trust it and just throw it over to AI. And so let's bring that to AI now. And Ryan, talk about AI and how it's being incorporated into organizations to help out. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I like that question too, because we think about artificial intelligence and machine learning, and it's like there's a lot of buzz around it, and what does that actually mean? It's not this all-encompassing. We send the computer our data, and it tells us all the bad stuff and fixes it all. AI and machine learning are very good at very specific use cases where we're recognizing and acting on a narrow pattern, and that's really where you can incorporate AI into your automation workflow. Is I know every time a given alert fires, when a person interacts with it, if I'm recording that data, I know people are running the following playbooks, or these are the actions, the steps that we're taking. We can then use AI to make recommendations and produce those playbooks. It's not a sense of I'm just going to send off all my data to this AI platform, black box platform, and get back answers. It's very much let's look at the narrow behavioral patterns, and I'm speaking behavioral patterns in terms of incident response and remediation, and then we can apply that at scale in an environment.
Thank you. And Joel, let's keep talking about AI, but let's take the look at workforce. Everyone's talking about AI, and then the people that are in the jobs right now are saying, wait, is that going to replace me? So what impact does AI have on the workforce from your perspective?
As far as security goes, it's not going to change anything. Look, AI and machine learning is not all unsupervised. Every organization is going to want their own outcomes, and they're going to have to provide the input back into the machine learning process, the automated intelligence process, in order to achieve the outcomes that they want that are right for them. And that includes, building on the back end, right? It includes building the machine learning algorithms, feeding it the threat information, continuing that cycle of improving it over and over. It's not like the machine just takes over and does it on its own, I assure you, right? So there's going to continue to be plenty of workload for everybody. What automation and machine learning is going to do for us in the SOAR context is it's going to make sure that the response is faster and more consistent than the humans could do. It's not going to remove those jobs that are associated with it. They're just going to shift and change and evolve along with the machine learning processes.
Yeah. Nathan, I'd love to hear your voice on the workforce issue too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Joel's saying there, and I think some of us might be a little disappointed that Skynet isn't going to take over and just run everything for us so we don't have to. But I think one of the key things that if you're in security leadership that you need to take away from this is that there are going to be people nervous about this. Whether it's founded or not, there is a lot of concern from the workforce that they are going to be replaced. And Joel's correct. That's just not real. But I think the way that leadership can position this a little bit is to help people understand that the goal of this really is to get security folks back into doing the things that they do well, the things that you hired them to do in the first place. And we all get caught up in just having to get it done. That's just daily life. You ask any security team what their main tool is that they use, most of them will tell you it's Excel, right? We're running spreadsheets of data, making analysis on what patches are missing or what workstations are causing problems that we respond. We can automate a lot of these kinds of functionalities and get those talented, expensive security professionals back to doing the things they're good at, the things they like to do, and that are ultimately going to bring more value to the organization. So it's not even, there is an evolution for sure. These systems have to be maintained. Joel's spot on. But I know many, many teams who've hired pen testers who are now doing endpoint management because they just need someone to do it. Get those pen testers back to pen testing. Get them bringing the value that you need from other areas in your organization, and let these kind of SOAR platforms or AI processes automate the minutia that's tying them up from doing that.
So what I'm hearing is, if you think there are people in your organization who are concerned about jobs being taken over by AI, the leadership should just address it out front. Get out in front of it, say that this is what it's going to do, and explain just what you said, Nathan, so that people know ahead of time this is going to help you do the job you're supposed to instead of those menial tasks.
Yeah, if your team's buried under that minutia, that's just going to be a breath of fresh air for them to hear from their leadership that you acknowledge that they're getting tied up in those boring tasks, and you're finally going to let them run. This is the skill set they trained for. They've been dying to do it. Right. It's a huge benefit to organizations that are struggling with this kind of thing.
Yeah, great points. All right, so now we're talking about workforce, we're talking about talent. You know, I've been working in cybersecurity workforce talent issues since NICE started over at NIST years ago. And I see a lot of disconnect between the hiring part and the security. There's a lot of people that are looking for security jobs and can't seem to find them. So in some way, we're missing the connection between the companies and the actual talent. But let's talk about, how do you retain talent? How do you find talent? And Ben, I'd love to have you start with that.
Yeah, so I'll give you the quick short version, which is the technologies we're talking about can remove a lot of that manual drudgery, which is going to help you not necessarily solve the talent problem, but it's going to go a long way towards helping you. At my organization, to directly answer your question, Kristin, we've had a lot of luck out of our own security operations center. So this is our own in-house staff of highly qualified men and women whose job is to protect the intellectual capital of my company. We've had a lot of success in bringing on these level one. So I don't want to call a level one SOC analyst an entry level, but it's the junior role on that broader team. And taking that individual, and especially once that individual has kind of demonstrated his or her capabilities, maybe over the first 3 months, 6 months of employment, that's when we will reach in to these A players, the folks that we definitely want to keep, the folks that we think are either currently rock stars or might be a future rock star on our staff. And we do job rotations. And we don't check with HR. We don't make these official changes. We don't change job titles. I'm talking about maybe once every other week, we're taking somebody out of that level one seat and we're putting that person to shadow a level two analyst, maybe for a half a day every other week, or maybe a full day every other week, just to provide some spice, just to provide maybe the light at the end of the tunnel for that overworked level one analyst to understand that there is a career path. And you don't just have your manager saying, this is how you can move from 1 to 2 to 3. You're allowing that individual to actually get a taste of what that next role might look like. One of the very early important lessons I learned in my career was the importance of, whether you want to call it job rotations or internships, just the importance of being able to taste lots of different things, because it's going to give you two important answers. And now I'm speaking to the individual who's in that level one seat. It's going to tell you what you like, and maybe much more importantly, it's going to tell you what you don't like. And the sooner that you figure out in your career what you don't like, the better career choices you're going to be able to make. So I would encourage you to think about that. It doesn't cost any money. Again, we're not talking about promoting folks. It's a very easy thing in many organizations, not to make this a full-time move, but to carve out just a little time, few hours, maybe every other week. That's by far the number one thing, Kristin, we found that helps us with retention.
Well, and you're building in a mentorship probably there too. If they hang out together for that day, half a day every other week, then maybe that's the person they can call to and say, how did you get there? And they have those conversations. What a great idea.
It's a win-win, right? It's a win-win for the mentee. It's also a win for the mentor, because that's another way to provide recognition to maybe this more senior member of your staff that you're not just doing a great day job, but we believe enough in your interpersonal skills. Maybe this is somebody I want to groom to be a future team lead or a future manager. The more successful mentoring relationships that individual has, the higher my confidence will be to ultimately promote that person. So it's absolutely a win-win.
That's inspiring. Thank you. Ryan, did you want to join in on this? Then we'll go to Nathan.
I just, you spoke to the idea of job rotations and getting to experience some of those different roles. And I can just give some kind of a firsthand experience there. At ReliaQuest, I started as an analyst in our SOC. And I was able through a program similar to that, where I'm going to just shadow for a couple hours, see what the engineer, the SIM engineering team, see what the implementations are, the delivery management, the solutions architecture team, which is where I am, inevitably ended up. So like being able to experience those different roles allowed me to grow within an organization, get that experience rapidly, and still maintain familiarity with one organization. It prevents, instead of having to hop from 3 different organizations, I was able to experience all those different roles within one place.
That's great. Nathan?
Yeah, I love those kinds of programs. I think the rotation and mentorship programs are so valuable in organizations. I would love to see more follow that kind of path. It's a big win for everybody involved. We're talking about kind of two concepts here, though. We go back to the original question. I mean, there's the issue of attracting people to your company, and there's the issue of retaining. And I do want to actually address both those separately because I think they're really, really critical, especially in this day and age. In terms of attracting folks, I mean, I hear this from both sides. I know security folks who say, I can't find any work, I can't find jobs, I don't know what's going on. And I hear hiring managers, of course, say on the other side, there's, we have what, 3 million, I think is what the current estimate is, 3 million unfilled security positions right now. We can't find anyone to fill them. But I think we have some challenges from a hiring side, and I would address this into the hiring managers, HR folks, leaders who might be listening here. This is the time to really start thinking outside the box a little bit about how you hire and the kinds of skill sets you bring to your company, because I think we've gotten caught a little bit in this idea that information security is really just an arm of IT, that it's just a technical function in the organization, and you need developers or engineers, and that's the only people you can find. And since those are in high demand, we're just stuck. But the reality is, information security is a risk management function, and risk management as a concept, I mean, that crosses all kinds of different industries, and you can find very, very talented people who understand the concepts of risk and how to manage it in finance, in legal. I've seen auditors come out of, working for CPA firms and becoming amazing security analysts. There's a lot of folks out there who understand really good troubleshooting and critical thinking skills and can apply that to risk management framework. So this is the time to start thinking outside the box. Look at the needs of the organization from an InfoSec perspective, and look at it from that risk management lens. And you may find that you can broaden the net a little bit about the kinds of people you're looking for who can fill those roles, who can do the kind of risk analysis work you need to do. And that's, I mean, it's only a benefit to everyone when we can bring that diversity of skill set into the equation. That said, on the retention side, I'm gonna run on a little bit here, but bear with me. I think on the retention side, we've been stuck for a long time, I think, in this sort of Silicon Valley mode of, let's make sure that we overcompensate everybody. Sorry, guys, we get paid a lot. Make sure we have break rooms full of food and beer, and foosball tables in every floor of the office. I keep going back to my whole big foos lobbyist group. I know they're out there, but we've been doing this for 15, 20 years now, and it's worked okay for a while, but I think the workforce has shifted a lot in the last 5 years, and especially in the last year during pandemic times. We're seeing people really value that cultural positivity in organizations that supports personal fulfillment, where organizations realize that their employees need flexible schedules, or they need to have time off to volunteer, or like we do here at Tenable. I mean, I get time off to vote. My company made sure that that's an important piece of what we do as a culture, right? These are the kinds of things that stand out in a lot of companies. When I talk to colleagues who say, like, yeah, I can find a better paying job, but my current company lets me volunteer 1 week out of the year, or they make sure that I can take care of my kids after school, or whatever the case is. So if you're a company who's concerned about retaining your staff, look inward, look at your culture, look how you're taking care of people. Compensation comes and goes, and people will find it. And by the way, boss, I'll take a raise if you're going to listen out there. But culture, like, focus on that culture and make sure that your people are valued and taken care of in their personal lives, and you'll find a much more loyal workforce.
Great point. I mean, they say people don't leave their job, they leave their boss, or they leave, in a sense, the culture. So great point. I'm going to take this next question over to Joel. Joel, we're talking about automating responses because something happened. But can't we just work on prevention? I've been in education and awareness the last 12 years or so. What about just preventing things?
Well, look, I mean, I think it's universally accepted in security that the earlier in the kill chain you're able to take effective action, the better off we all will be. And prevention certainly is before response. But let's also remember that, it's not automated response, it's security orchestration, automation, and response, right? Those aren't necessarily tied together. So security orchestration is prevention, right? That is part of this. And in fact, we've used machine learning. We've had prevention around for decades. Yes, the adoption rate is low. The effectiveness of our operationalization of those tools within individual organizations is also, I think, low across the board. I think we need to adopt more of these tools. We need to learn how to, properly operationalize them, accept the risk, provide processes around these tools in order to, bring it, earlier in the kill chain, like we're talking about with prevention, and also trust the tools to do automated response. Automated response, regardless of how effective your prevention, capabilities are, there's still going to be breaches, right? So bringing that automated response into the fold is critically important. One example would be, post facto threat hunting. There's always a time within an organization where maybe a 0-day got in and there was no indication from tools that there was a threat that entered the environment. But once you detected what that threat is, you find those indicators of compromise. Part of that automated response should be going through that organization and finding hosts that were breached by that particular threat and then cleaning them up. So, all throughout the kill chain, that needs to be part of it. Prevention is definitely the most effective, and we need to have a continued or renewed focus in that realm as well.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm going to ask this question to you. How can you integrate automations with your incident response program?
Yeah, I think to tie into a lot of what Joel was saying, but also what we've talked about earlier, right, is your automations, that's not tied just to response. It's how closely can you have your automation piece be with your incident response piece. So the second an alert fires, the second you have some kind of detection, we know what kind of pivot searches we're going to be doing. We know what kind of technologies we're going to need data from. And so we can have those automatically kick off. We can start looking at that data and present our people element, present our analysts with all the data points they need to make decisions. And that goes even beyond the initial alerting. That's in the detection phase too. Like, what automations can we build? How can we automatically retrieve data and apply context, apply transforms to that data so that our decision making can be accelerated? We're building efficiency into that decision making tree, and that's ultimately where where those automations and IR tie together.
Thank you. Ben, this question's for you. Are there any core capabilities you've seen which are particularly important in a typical SOAR solution?
Absolutely. And I think just about any technology has things that are very complementary that are sometimes overlooked. They might be essential. And in the encryption space, my company's heritage, lots of people understand the benefits of encryption, and they don't necessarily get the importance of key management as a super crazy related component to that. And I would argue from a SOAR perspective, one of the reasons that the SOAR platforms, the successful ones that we've seen and offered, are that way is because they've recognized that threat intelligence could be brought to you by one or more vendors externally, but actually embedding that into your SOAR platform, preferably from the get-go, is something that I think is critical and important. Not every SOAR platform is built that way, and the ones that aren't built that way can certainly import. We can go all the way back to the very first integration question. But finding a SOAR platform that really kind of has threat intelligence at its heart, Kristin, we think is particularly effective.
Thank you so much for that. So Nathan, question for you. What are some ways that we can better prioritize what threats are addressed automatically versus those which need the hands-on attention? There we go.
Trouble with my I have a little trouble with my mute there. Yeah. So I'm gonna piggyback right off of Ben's comments. I mean, you kind of really need to start with some good understanding of your threat landscape, and having good threat intelligence is a piece of that, but also having an understanding of your own environment. And it really comes down to kind of two pieces in a lot of ways. Is understanding where your critical assets live today. Like, not all assets are created equal, and you do have to understand how that pertains to the business. Again, risk management function here. So where are the critical pieces that could affect your business in major ways? I see organizations, a lot of cases, they make some very broad decisions around things like, well, all of our laptops are not critical because I can just reimage those anytime I want. Well, except maybe the CFO's laptop might be a little more critical because they've got all the financial statements loaded on that thing for whatever reason. They shouldn't have it there. But maybe that laptop is a little more critical. And if I have an incident happening against that laptop, I want to prioritize that over other laptops in the organization. So, understanding where those critical assets live, being able to identify that, mapping that out is a really big piece of how you automate responses for the less important things, but bring up to the human attention the ones that are more important. And then if you can also apply that good, smart threat intelligence to the criticality of the problem, right? If I know that I have lots of mitigating controls around phishing emails and I see a phishing email come in, I might not be quite as concerned about that. It's low risk to my environment. It doesn't have any kind of scripts in it or whatnot. I can probably let my current controls take care of that in an automated fashion. But if I know that I have a unpatched system with a super critical vulnerability that has known exploits in the wild, and we know that criminal actors right now are taking advantage of it currently, yeah, I think I want to prioritize that to my people to make some decisions about what do we want to do about it. So having that good understanding of your critical assets and having that good threat intelligence around what the exploit or the problem is a fundamental way to draw that line between here are the things I can easily automate, but here are the things that I want to bring up to the surface so that I can get some human attention on it.
Great point. Joel, I want to ask you this question. So we're talking about how automated responses now are going to be a part of what's happening in these security organizations. So it's essentially going to give machines the power to make critical security decisions. Are there any things that you think the organizations need to know to adapt to that?
Well, they need to familiarize themselves with the platforms they're using. They need to understand, as I've said several times here, the risks associated with that, and they need to build processes around it. We aren't going to let these things run unsupervised, right? This is something where we're going to continue to interact with the SOAR platform and the rest of the solutions within our environment, and continue to tweak our processes, continue to tweak our policy in order to achieve the outcomes that we want, right? So I think it's, you need to take a disciplined approach, as you do with the rest of the security, especially so around SOAR, so that, things don't run awry. And when they do, you could correct the actions and ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Thank you. Ben, did you want to chime in on this too?
Yeah, briefly, I think it's been a very consistent thread today. The importance of knowing your own environment. It's about knowing where your assets are. It's knowing what the state of those assets are. It's knowing what those business processes are that you're trying to automate. All of this stuff is great. You can't necessarily rely on your vendor just to show up with a big red easy button that you can press to get going. So from an implementation perspective, the most successful customers I have worked with and seen are those that already have a good sense around their asset management, which, yes, it's not very exciting, but it's absolutely mandatory. I will go so far, Kristin, to say that I think just about every problem in information security today boils down to an asset management question. If you don't have your assets identified, prioritized, risk tested, if you will, you're going to be that much further behind the 8 ball. So hear that clean thread, I hope, is my advice to everybody. You need to know your environment, know your processes.
Identify is the #1 step in the NIST cybersecurity framework for a reason. So, and all the other frameworks. So wonderful. Thank you. Nathan, last question, then we'll do a wrap up. How much should the non-IT business units in your organization be involved in the SOAR implementation? You talked a little bit about how this is a risk management issue, security. So how do you involve the other business units?
Well, I think it's important to first identify that you do need to get other business units in your organization outside of the technology folks involved, especially when we're talking about the response side of the equation. Certainly the orchestration automation pieces, that's very heavily in your IT and InfoSec kind of worlds. But when you get into response, anyone who's been into response will tell you, this gets way, way bigger than just the IT folks or the security folks. You may need to get your legal counsel involved. You may have to get HR involved if you're dealing with an insider threat or an employee issue. You may have to get your PR and marketing folks involved. If you've got you're a public company, you've got a public threat, you may have to make a statement and get that out to the world. And these are all sort of resultant parts of the workflow that, while the SOAR platform itself may not automate the PR that you send, the press release you put out to the news, I would not recommend doing that. But you want to be able to know that that's part of your response processes and know that those people need to be part of it. So it's really important to have those players involved in the early discussions as well, so that everybody's clear about what the response process is, who needs to be involved, what triggers need to happen as you go down the road. And if you can automate at least the notifications around that to say, hey, this is a big enough event, it meets certain thresholds, go talk to legal and PR and get them involved now. That's a big benefit for a lot of organizations so that they can take that response playbook and make sure that it's consistent, it's repeatable, and you're not letting anything fall through the gaps when you do need to get those other agencies or other business units involved.
Security and IT cannot live in a silo. You really can't live in a bubble. You are a part of the entire organization. That comes through in any conversation I have with people in positions like yours. All right, now we're going to take some time to have, last minute wrap up from everybody. We're going to ask each person to just, leave the audience with your final tips, best advice you can about SOAR implementation in your organization. And I want to make sure that the audience knows that we all, 5 of us, have booths available for you to come and visit. We'd love to have you continue the conversation. Go to the booths. They've been really interactive. A lot of people have been visiting. We've really appreciated the relationships we've made through them. So take time to continue the conversation. And then Joel, would you give your last parting words to the audience for us?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, a common theme, and this is, what we're all driving towards, with SOAR anyway, is that we need to focus on operationalizing our security environments and the technology that we have, right? I think that we should all be forward looking, but have that meaningful goal, have a disciplined plan to get there. And instead of focusing on all of the latest and greatest tools and forklifting all of your technology, focus on operationalizing the technology that you have, operationalizing the tools that you need in order to get to those goals that you have, right? Rather than spending all of your cycles in the life cycle of devices. This is a big problem within security in general. I think it's a problem within IT overall. And SOAR is part of that, right? It's focusing on the processes around making these tools effective, right? So that your organization can improve their efficacy specific to security in this environment.
Thank you. Ryan.
I want to just piggyback on something that Joel said just now, which is focus on the technologies and the tools that you have in place and getting the most value out of those and integrating those and building automations around technologies that you already have, and really taking a look at your security program and your incident response program end to end and identifying those places where you can gain efficiencies and where you can mature your program. You don't need to invest in a million tools and always have the latest and greatest in technology. You can really build the process and make sure you're getting the ROI out of the technologies that you already own. And that's really the first step into building a mature and an automated security program.
Thank you. Last parting words from you, Nathan?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to reiterate one point I made earlier, which is to remind everyone, this is a risk management exercise, right? At the end of the day, all of what we're doing needs to be seen through that risk management lens, not necessarily a purely technical lens. It's very important, but when you're looking at your implementation, you're looking at your workforce management, you're looking at processes, you're looking at how you retain people, all of the subjects we've covered today, really, there's a benefit to organizations to stop looking at this as an IT problem, look at this as a risk management problem. It will change the way you view the process, change the way you interact with your employees. It changes the way you implement the whole end-to-end process around the technology. And that's the key change I think a lot of folks need to make so that they can be successful with these things.
But we need to keep explaining to everyone involved in business that, and even in personal life, cybersecurity is a risk management issue. I talk to a lot of elected officials. My job is to let elected officials know their role. They can't think it's just an IT thing because then they'll just not pay attention. It's a risk management issue. Great. 100%. Ben, would you round it out for us?
Yes, ma'am. And let me just add one more change to Nathan's great summary there, and that is there could be a change for the better in your budget. If you do a good enough job convincing your boss that this is not just a security problem, it's a risk management problem, the money that you've been asking for weeks or months might suddenly appear. Maybe it comes out of another bucket. So while SOAR is not going to be an easy button, while it is going to require that knowledge around processes and that knowledge around your existing technologies, thinking about it holistically as a risk management problem makes a lot of sense.
Thank you so much. I always learn something new on these talks. Thank you, gentlemen, all for sharing your expertise with the audience. And I want to remind them again to go visit all of our booths and keep engaged. And this is it for Cybersecurity Summit. And thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.